Today, we're going to be talking about something very near and dear to my heart, and that is scary story narrators. For those of you who don't know, I'm a bit of a scary story connoisseur. I eat, breathe, and sleep scary stories. Nothing fuels the night terrors and sleep paralysis demons like a good scary story before bed. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so kicking it off, we've got Mr. Nightmare, the king of all kings. For any of you who have been listening to scary stories for a while now, you will know that Mr. Nightmare has been at the top for a very long time, and for good reason. He has consistently been putting out high quality content with a good selection of stories, and I think he is probably the first narrator I ever listened to. So for that reason, I'm undoubtedly going to put him in S tier. He absolutely deserves it. The only thing that I can say about Mr. Nightmare that's negative is that I wish there was more content to listen to. Since I like listening to stories when I go to sleep, the 30 to 40 minute videos don't always cut it, but it's still a nice little bonus seeing an upload from Mr. Nightmare. Okay, next up we've got B. Busta. B. Busta is a British narrator, and the thing for me is I don't really like listening to accents when I'm listening to stories. That's just a personal preference. However, if I'm trying to be somewhat objective, I do think he is a good creator, but I'm gonna go ahead and put him in B tier for now, just because of the accent. It is mainly the accent for me. B. Busta is British and belongs in B tier. There's some alliteration for you for the day. Alright, next up, I think this is Mr. Creepypasta. I get these two confused between Creeps McPasta and Mr. Creepypasta, but I believe this is Mr. Creepypasta. Another creator I don't personally listen to. However, I did do some research on some of these creators before making this video, and I can confidently say that his videos are high quality. You can tell he puts in a lot of effort, and his narrating is also probably his strong suit. He is a very theatrical narrator, very performative, if that's a word. And so for those reasons, I'm going to go ahead and put him in A tier. I do think there are some improvements that could be made surrounding maybe the audio, the sound effects. He could certainly do more to create more of an ambiance around the stories, but his narration is definitely top notch. Alright, next up. Whoa, who's this handsome devil? How did he get in here? Oh, you know what? I think that's twitch.tv/Gadoofus. Make sure to go give him a follow if you want to see content like this live. Now, with that shameless self-promotion out of the way, I undoubtedly deserve to go in S tier. We'll put me up here for now. We've got Let's Read. Now, Let's Read is another personal favorite of mine. I've been listening to him just as long, maybe, as Mr. Nightmare, and Let's Read, aka Joel, is just an absolute legend. He consistently puts out good, high-quality narrations, and I'm talking long format, being 2 to 3, maybe even 4-hour videos for you to listen to when you're sleeping, when you're working, when you're doing homework, or whatever it may be. And a cool little thing about Let's Read is, if you tune into his live streams, you get to see him actually doing the recording of the narrations live. And this means you can hear him, occasionally making a mistake, and he'll kind of curse under his breath, like, oh shit, and then he'll have to redo the line, which is kind of funny. Also, just him interacting with his chat in between stories, so if that's something you're interested in seeing, be sure to go check that out. But Let's Read undoubtedly deserves a spot in S tier, in my opinion. Alright, next we've got Corpse Husband. Now, I'm not actually sure why I included him in this list, because he doesn't even do scary story narrations anymore. However, because he's such an iconic figure in the scary story community, I had to include him. Personally, I never listened to him much because, as I said earlier, accents and voices that are just kind of very distinct, for me, just detract from the stories. But that being said, I definitely think he deserves a spot in A tier at the least, just trying to be as objective as possible. Alright, coming down to Creeps McPasta, another British creator, automatically going to go in B tier for me, unfortunately. His stories and narrations are very good, and I can tell there's high production value in his videos, but again, the accent for me just throws it off every time, and I unfortunately cannot get interested in the stories. That is just a personal preference for me. Alright, next up we've got one to be excited about, Mr. Ballin. Mr. Ballin is somewhat newer compared to some of these other creators in the scary story atmosphere, if you will. And the cool thing about Mr. Ballin is he is the only creator, at least that I'm aware of, that does these sort of in-person story narrations on video. So you actually get to see him in person telling you the story. He's very expressive, very visual. He uses a lot of visual imagery to help set the mood, set the tone of the stories. And he's also recently done live storytelling events, which is something I've never even heard of, which I think is just awesome. So Mr. Ballin, I think, is at bare minimum going to go in A tier. I do think there are some things that I wish were a little different about his storytelling. Mainly that sometimes the stories can kind of drag on. as opposed to Mr. Nightmare, Let's Read, some of these other creators where the story is just playing out smoothly. It seems like Mr. Ballin is kind of dragging the stories along to build suspense, which is fair. Just sometimes it isn't what I'm in the mood for. So for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and place him in A tier, but he is close, very close to making it into S tier. All right, next up on the list, we've got Booze and Booze, a very underrated creator in my opinion. I actually stumbled upon him quite by accident. I believe I was just listening to stories while I slept and it kind of auto-played onto one of his, and I was pleasantly surprised. I actually circled back to some of his videos doing research for this video, and I do think he definitely deserves more attention. His storytelling is really good. His voice is very soothing in my opinion. And the sound effects he's using, he uses background noises kind of like rain, campfires. You can tell he's really putting in a lot of effort to try and create that atmosphere around the story. And compared to like the number of subscribers he has, I definitely think he deserves more. I'm going to have to put him in A tier because I definitely see the potential. But I can't quite put him in S tier, the same category as Mr. Nightmare or Let's Read. I think that would just be a bit overkill. Even putting him in the same category as Mr. Ballin is a bit of a stretch, but I definitely do believe he has a lot of potential, in my personal opinion. Next up, I saved the best for last. For those of you who don't know, the Dark Somnium is by far, in my opinion, the best scary story narrator there is. And I actually just discovered him more recently, maybe in the past year, and I have no idea how I haven't heard of this guy. I mean, as soon as I started listening to his stories, I was hooked. I had to go through and listen to all of his stories. Something about the audio, the sound effects, everything he uses to create this atmosphere around his stories is just mind-blowing. And another fun fact about the Dark Somnium, he actually composes music for his stories himself, which makes sense because the audio is one of the things that really drew me in. So you can tell he knows what he's doing with sound and audio and stuff like that. And even on top of that, his voice, to the narration, to the, pacing, to the voice acting, he actually has friends and I believe it's his girlfriend doing voice acting in the stories as well. It is just very high production, very well put together, very well selected stories as well. The stories are always very good. For that reason, and this may just be pure recency bias, but I am going to have to give the Dark Somnium his own category, and that category is going to be called Eargasm. Because that is the experience you get while listening to the Dark Somnium. And there you have it. There's my scary story narrator tier list. If there are any creators that I left out that you think deserve a mention on this, make sure to comment it down below and I'll definitely go check them out. And who knows, maybe I'll make an updated tier list one day based off of the creators that you guys recommend. If you enjoyed this content, make sure to like and subscribe, and maybe go check out my Twitch if you want to see this sort of content done live. I stream there every day at 11 p.m. EST. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.